Welcome back, everyone. This is the FloTrack podcast. I am Kevin Sully, again, by myself here. Gordon promises to be back later on this week. We'll see if he comes through with that promise. But today we're going to recap the London Marathon. Also, I will answer any questions we got in the chat. So if you're watching live on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. Drop some questions in the chat as we go. But mostly this show is going to be about recapping the London Marathon. Yahuwah, as expected, delivers in just her second marathon of her career. Amos Kiproutu, who was second fiddle to Eliud Kipchoge in Tokyo, he gets his first world marathon major win. So both races went as expected. Times were not as quick as I thought. I thought going into the races, we could potentially on the women's side see that women's only record be broken. We also could potentially have seen a 2:15. Probably some of that was after watching what Asefa did in Berlin, running the 2:15, you start to think, oh man, there's other women in London who have much better backstories or resumes than she is. Maybe that'll translate to a fast time here in London. But it was fast, but it was normal fast. It wasn't crazy fast, we should say. So I'm going to get into it. We're going to do I'm going to do 15 takeaways. Now, normally with these shows post-London, I used to do this when I was writing. I do 26 takeaways, and it's tough, 26 miles, 26 takeaways. You want to make it match up. That's the hook to grab the reader, pull them in, or the viewer. But really, it's tough to get past 15 or 16. That's what I've learned. It's tough to have 26 opinions on any one race. If it was a track meet, probably you could get there, but there's no hook there. There's no connection with 26 for track. For the marathon, it works with the miles. So I understood that this time. I went for 15. So I'm going to give you my best 15 takeaways from the London Marathon. Again, if you're watching live, let me know what you think in the chat. What did you think of the races? What do you think of the rest of the fall marathon slate? What are you excited to see now that it shifts to the U.S., in Chicago, in New York? What are you excited to see in those two marathons? But I'm going to start first. Takeaway number one, we'll start with Yahuwah. Yelamzerf Yahuwah, 2:17.26. 2:17.26, just 23 years old. She has the second fastest half marathon in history. She's the road 10K world record holder. And now she has 2 times in the top 11 in women's marathoning history. 3 other women have 2 marks in the top 10. Bridget Kosgei, of course, who has a world record. Paula Radcliffe and Ruth Chepngetich. So 2 of those women are obviously absolute legends within the sport of marathon running. And now Yahuwah has joined that group. And she's only 23 years old. And if you watch the way she ran that race, you have to feel really optimistic about her future in the distance. Now, not every half marathoner is going to translate to the marathon. You have countless examples of that being true. But Yahuwah has now done it twice. The first time in Hamburg against decent competition, but not competition like this, and she runs 2:17.23. Now she does it against top flight competition, and it's a little different than doing it in an Olympics or in a non-rabbited race because you have a lot of variables there. Fewer variables here because it's pace, but just having people around that last 10 to 15 kilometers, a different experience than just being the out-and-out favorite and blowing everybody out of the water. So my first takeaway, just very impressed with Yahuwah. In particular, my second point here, 4:43, her 24-mile split. 4:43, everybody was incredulous. The broadcasters, people on social media, was that right? Was that a typo? At this point, if someone comes back to me and says, actually, that mile was measured incorrectly, I don't even want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. Hands down, the fastest split that's ever been reported for women's marathon running. Yahuwah, 4:43. It was 2:03 pace at mile 24. I'll say that again. 2:03 pace, and this was in the midst of her big breakaway. I did not think I would see a 4:43 split out there, and that's the number that you're going to remember, other than the 2:17. You're going to remember that. But you're also going to remember 4:43 as one of the great, just most memorable splits of all time. I think back to Jeffrey Kamor when he had that with, was it a 13:01? I think it was a 13:01 5K split within a half marathon. Just an insane run. Now, that tells me something important, though. I think that there's really more here with Yahuwah. You pull up the half marathon splits here, and early on they were in 2:16 pace, but at halfway 1:08:46 for that lead group. She was well within herself, and it was a big group, a lot of big names, a lot of women who are capable of running 2:17 in that mix. I think Yahuwah, if she were to go to a Valencia next year, or maybe if she even runs back London in the spring, we'll get to that in a little bit, the fact that we're going to have back-to-back Londons in different marathon seasons, I think she could go out a little more aggressively here. I think she handled that pace, and part of that's because she's a 63-minute half marathoner, so a high 68 is very manageable, but to be able to split 4:43 late in the race just shows you how much confidence she has. That was just mind-boggling. Now, flip side of things, I love moments of relatability within a marathon, and Yahuwah had one about 10K to go in the race. The pack is still together, and all of a sudden, you're watching on the feed, you can't see it because she's obstructed, but you see all the other women in the pack, or at least a couple of them, turn around. We're showing it now if you're watching on the YouTube stream. That's Yahuwah in the back. She tripped over a speed bump, it appears, because you see a speed bump there on the road, and then she went down. Didn't cause her any sort of issues within the race, but you could see she lost some distance, catches right back up. This is so relatable to me because I'm a person who once a year, maybe twice a year, I'll be honest with you guys. Twice a year, I'm good for a solid tripping over the sidewalk and really scratching my hands mid-run. Right? You can pencil a couple of those in, and usually it's because I'm not paying attention, I'm daydreaming, I'm not picking up my feet, I'm just sort of shuffling along. And I think for Yahuwah, that pace was so easy for her that she was doing the same thing, just out looking around, checking out the fans, maybe looking at her watch every now and then, didn't notice a slight rise, and then boom, she goes down. It woke her up. She was able to react and get back with that pack, and it didn't disrupt her too much. But again, these athletes they do insane things that we could never dream to accomplish in terms of the types of times that they put out in these marathons, like with that 4:43. But then they also have moments where they show that they're mortal just like us. So I appreciate Yahuwah for that. Hopefully she's no worse for wear. Didn't see any photos afterwards of whether or not she scratched up her hands. Maybe the London roads are just really smooth and it was a super soft landing, and she was all good. So Yahuwah responds from the fall and then gets right back up and keeps rolling. Number four. I want to talk about the two different world records for the women, because World Athletics a couple of years ago said, we're going to have two different categories, right? There's the mixed gender races, where obviously men are able to pace the women, and then there's the single gender races. So you have two different world records. So you pull up the all-time list and you look. Now I think everybody says when they're asked what's the world record in the women's marathon, 2:14:04, Bridget Kosgei in Chicago 2019. But a record that got tossed around a lot on Sunday morning was Mary Katani's 2:17:01, which for a while it looked like, especially when Yahuwah was running 440s out there, hey, that record might go down too. And I just want to know, what record do we think is going to be the harder one to break? Is it the 2:14:04 when you have male pacers, or is it the 2:17 when you're just running with women? Before Sunday, I definitively would have said, okay, 2:14. I don't care if there's pacers out there taking you all the way to 26 miles, but that takes off Berlin. Like you can't use Berlin or Chicago basically, because they're not there. It seems like they're always going to have that setup where it's going to be a mixed gender race out there, which would leave London as the main race that gets you to the women's only record. So it's almost 3 minutes slower, but it obviously makes a big difference when you have pacers there the entire way versus pacers there, 25 to 30K. I'm going to say I still think that 2:14:04 is going to be tougher to achieve, but when you see someone like Titus Sefa at Berlin in her second marathon, drop a mid 2:15, so you're like, okay, well, maybe we need to rethink these records. But I think that Kaitani mark for single gender women's only marathon mark of 2:17:01. That's a tough record. That's a tough record that doesn't get spoken about a bunch. On that all-time list too, you see Kosgei's mark from Tokyo, right? So that had male pacers in it as well. Radcliffe's 2:15:25, that was before they had just the all-women's race and then the mass race afterwards. So maybe there'll be a race that's lightning quick that makes it women's only. But right now, I think London is that best shot, and it's just that's a tough record. Like Catani's 2:17:01 was no joke. So I just think it's a fun thing to keep tabs on which one's gonna be tough. On that same point, Dustin in the chat says the solo is tough. Kipchoge shows how important having pacers is. Unless you assemble the perfect field, hard to hit 2:17 without a mixed field. Yeah, and that was the fun with, not to get on a Kipchoge tangent, I'll do that later too. But that was the fun part with Breaking 2 and with the Ineos 159 Challenge. You got to see Kipchoge have pacers all the way, so you got to see him in just that fully optimized setting. And for someone like Kipchoge, who's just running too fast to even have pacers, and the men's side of the competition, you're always going to run out of pacers at a certain point. Women, you can have the men go all the way to the finish line if you wanted to, but Kipchoge and the men's side of things, they were always going to be limited by how long they could have pacers. And you see this on the track, correct? Right? Like the track, they're not having mixed gender races. So who's ever going after a world record, doesn't matter if it's Faith Kipyegon, if it's Latensepet Gede, if it's Joshua Cheptegei, eventually the pacers are going to run out and they're by themselves. The Kipchoge experiment allowed us to see, hey, what's it look like when you have somebody all the way to the end? And on the women's side of things, you get to see that in Chicago. You get to see that in Berlin. I like it when they get their own stage. Like I like it when it's women's only. But obviously, it's going to help having more people out there for a longer period of time, breaking the wind for you, setting the pace. So you don't need to worry about the pace. That's only going to help. I mean, imagine the world where Yehuala in that mile 24, where she's running 4:40, whatever, has just a crew of pacers in front of her, just a squad of pacers breaking the wind for her. I mean, how fast could she have gone on that second half of things? So just something to think about as we move forward, the difference in these races. Yeah, Dustin mentions maybe they could lay down 26.2 miles of wavelights technology and could happen solo. If any place is going to do that, it's going to be Valencia, because they are just dead set on becoming the fastest town ever. Brendan asks, G'day predictions in Valencia 2:13. I'm going to get to that in a sec. I'm going to get to what we think is going to happen the rest of the marathon season. So hold on to that thought. Let's go to number 5. We're on number 5. Jocelyn Jepkosgei, still in the mix. Great race. Get second. No shame in that. Yehuala is just really, really good. She runs 2:18:07. If you had to power rank right now the women's marathoners, it gets very tough, because you want to be not such a prisoner of the moment and just jump all the way on Yehuala. But Kosgei scratched. Jepkosgei got beaten. I guess we got to wait and see what Jepchirchir has in store. But at the very least, you say Jepkosgei is in the mix here. Number 6, let's talk about depth, though. Let's talk about overall, because you got a lot of names up there running under 2:19. Mergutu, 3rd. Career, 4th, all under 2:19. Then you have 2 more women, sub 2:20. I went and looked this up. This is becoming par for the course, whether or not it's Tokyo, whether or not it's Berlin now, or London last year, or the year before. Having 4 or 5 women sub 2:19 is becoming kind of a prerequisite in this current marathon era. Now, some of that's because the shoes are making things faster. Also, I think we're just getting to the point where there's enough women in the marathon who are going to the marathon early. Like Yehuala is 23 years old, right? She's using her prime, all of her prime, on the roads. So it's going to take something special in the next couple of years to put a historically deep race on a marathon course, because it's becoming the norm where we're seeing 4 or 5 women under 2:19, whereas it used to be a huge deal when we would see 1 or 2 women in a race. We talk about how crazy the depth is, but right now that just seems to be a pattern on the women's side of things. Like having that many women in the 2:18 range. Let's go to number 7. We're going to switch over to the men's side now. Amos Kiproutu. Is he the second best men's marathoner in the world? And does it matter? Because they're really all that far behind Eliud Kipchoge. I think you can make an argument for Amos Kiproutu. Runs solid time, 2:04 high. This was a very traditional-ish kind of marathon. The first half was quick, but it wasn't crazy. You had 4 or 5 men in the mix, and then one guy surged away at the end and prevailed. A couple guys fell off that you expected would be there. Sisse Lema, reigning champion. He had trouble, but everybody kind of stayed around the same range. I mean, even Kenenisa Bekele, only a minute 14 back. You had 4 guys within 50 seconds of each other. But Kiproutu, this performance combined with the second place performance in Tokyo to Kipchoge, which those actually convert to wins. Like if you go and you type them into a computer, you'd actually realize that a second place finish to Eliud Kipchoge these days counts as a win. So I'm willing to say Amos Kiproutu is number 2. The guy I used to have at number 2, Lawrence Chirono, got suspended for an anti-doping violation. So right now, I would have to say Amos Kiproutu is actually the second best guy in the world. Now, does it matter and how long will it last are 2 very good questions, because an interesting exercise for those of you who want homework, go back and list, ever since Kipchoge became clearly the number 1 marathoner in the world, how many different number 2s have there been? We tried to make Bekele the rival, but Bekele had that one race in Berlin. And even when he had that one race, it was very clear that Kipchoge was still number 1, and it took a little while because we had 2019, we had races canceled. But there have been so many people who have occupied that number 2 spot behind Eliud Kipchoge that have lost count at this point. So can Kiproutu, he's going to have to string it together for another, I would say another year, perhaps 2, to really to differentiate himself from all the others who have come before. Does it matter? I mean, I don't know. Like you look at the spring now, you got to figure he's probably going to try to go back to London to defend his title. We don't know where Eliud would go. And Kiproutu is obviously closer to everybody else than Kipchoge is to Kiproutu, right? The gap is between 1 and 2. There's not that much of a gap between 2 and 3 as we saw on Sunday morning. Number 8. Let's just talk about Kipchoge real quickly, because this just shows how good Eliud Kipchoge is once again. Because Kiproutu, he was handling business out there on Sunday, right? He had the, what was that? 420 something mile, either on 24 or 25. And I thought he looked in control. It's weird to say that in a marathon, but he was pulling away somewhat comfortably. And again, this is a guy that Kipchoge just handled in Tokyo with a similar, if not greater, level of ease. I'm not going to go too much down the Kipchoge rabbit hole today. But number 9. The times on both sides, men's side, women's side, 2:04 mid to high for the men, women 2:07 mid, and then 2:18s, kind of normalish. Maybe even a bit slower than people predicted. Certainly a bit slower than I predicted. Now, the weather we thought was going to be pretty good, and I thought it was pretty good. But I think sometimes with these marathons, we see one in the fall, and then we just get carried away and think that's going to translate to the next one. And the composition of the pack matters, right? The desire of the pack matters. Take that women's race, for example. What if instead of going out, what were they, 68:45 for the half? What if instead of a huge group at 68:45, 1 or 2 women went out, 68 flat or 67, win a minute faster? What would have been the result? Would 1 or 2 have been able to hang on, or would 1 have been able to hang on and run something crazy? Clearly, we know Yahuwah had something left. And similarly on the men's side, like they were together for a long way on the men's side. So it's weird to say, but it's almost, you see a 2:04 in a race like this, and you have to think, hey, is this kind of tactical-ish marathon, or 2:05s or 2:17s and 2:18s? Because there's definitely more than one way to approach this type of racing. And I feel like because 2:04s have been normalized, we have to think about it in a different way than we used to think about it. Same thing with the women and, 2:16, 2:17, 2:18. But times were a little more little more normal than I expected. Let's talk about Kenenisa Bekele. Number 10. Kenenisa Bekele. I thought he ran a great race. I thought this is as good as we can expect from Kenenisa Bekele in the year 2022. And I know that's probably not a comfort to Kenenisa Bekele because he wants to be competing for wins. But he ran 2:05.53. He's 40 years old. Broke the Masters record, which I think is kind of cool. I know on the track side of things, like Allison Felix was getting those 35 plus age group world records, which I thought was, kind of crazy because she's going and medaling at the Olympics. But Bekele, I thought, played it smart. I think Bekele knows what he has left and knows what he's capable of, because although he was leading that group, I think a year ago Bekele, or maybe 2 years ago Bekele, is pushing that pace and trying to chase a 2:02 and then blows up and goes backwards. I think he ran within himself today, and I think this is a smart race, and I think it was a good race considering where he's at, right? The days of expecting him to run and be that number 2 guy have passed. The days of him being considered an actual threat to Kipchoge, I don't think those days were ever there, although you look at, he's only 2 seconds behind what he ran in Berlin. It's hard to say he was completely out of the picture, but they never had that true head-to-head matchup where you got to see it. Right? London 2020, Bekele is a late scratch. Kipchoge has the worst marathon of his life. That thing completely fizzled and was a gigantic bust. So he was never going to be that guy. His best years were in the 5 and the 10. He had that one spectacular day in Berlin, and that was it. But he's a 40-year-old running sub 206. That's good. That's impressive. That's beyond. Maybe 10 years ago, if you told him that, he'd have taken it. But the marathon has changed so much to where it seems like a disappointment. But he's 40 years old running 205s. That's pretty good. And I remember in his last sort of years of relevance on the track, when he was hurt all the time, if you had told me in 2011 that Kenenisa Bekele would still be a legit top-tier marathoner 11 years later, I probably would have believed you because I know how talented he is, but I would not have thought it was a guarantee, and I would not have considered it a disappointment. So if you're a Bekele fan, be happy. Celebrate this stuff. Masters world records. I thought it was a great race for Kenenisa Bekele. Number 11, Bashir Abdi. He's just great at getting third. Third at the Olympics, third at the World Championships, and then gets third here, runs a solid time. He's always in the mix, and this was no different. 2:05.19, a solid run for him. This group is so stuck together, right? This group of guys that, depending on the course, I think are capable of running, 2:02 high all the way through 2:05. Like that's basically their range, and Abdi's in that group, and he's good in tactical races, and he's good in time trial races too. I know he wants to go beyond the third place finishes in some of these big time races, but good run for Bashir Abdi. Number 12, another London Marathon again in the spring. How's that going to change things? I already talked about this before. Will Kiproutu go back and do it again? Because, hey, I just won there. I'm going to re-up, run it again. Same thing with Yahuwah. Is she going to do it again? Or are they going to be less likely to do it because they just did it and maybe they want to experience something else, right? London has been in the fall now for 3 years, starting with that weird elite-only race on the Loop course back in 2020, which it was an incredible feat just to get that race off the ground and have a race in 2020 in the fall. And then they kept it there in 2021, and then now again in 2022, and then it's going to shift for 2023 back into the spring. So in order to do that, you have to have 2 races in quick succession. So I'm just wondering, how is that going to look? Are the fields going to be any different? Is it going to be easier for them to retain the defending champions? Is it going to be harder for them to retain the defending champions? On the men's side, there's one question that needs to come before all the other questions, which is, hey, Eliud, do you want to run a race? And then I think everything's going to fall from there. On the women's side, I think they're going to want to keep Yahuwah. I think they could advertise it. They could really push it as, okay, women's only record, course record potential, because now we've seen her do it twice. But again, maybe there's going to be a desire for someone to want to go and do something else. there's not as many options in the spring. Boston, I mean, you could go Tokyo in the like late winter, early spring, and Boston. Like, that's it. Like, fall has been crowded for a couple of years now. Boston had the field cleared for it last year because there was no London. So they're going to take some of those athletes, but it's not as crowded as the fall season, especially when you have a fall season coming after a major championship marathon that attracts the big stars, right? You got Berlin, you got Chicago, you got New York, and you also got Valencia now in December. But Valencia is attracting a lot of big names, even though it doesn't have the World Marathon Major designation. It's still it's creeping in there to where it's going to be like a de facto major, sort of in the same way as Dubai is in the early part of the year. But with Dubai, there's a mix there, but a lot of the Dubai athletes, because they don't have appearance money, is a lot of people on the breakout, like, hey, you win this and then you're a name. Whereas Valencia, I think they're doing a good job getting established names as well too. But I'm curious to see what's going to happen having the London Marathon in the spring. Let's go now. We got two more. We got 13 and 14. No, we got three more. 13, 14, 15. And then we'll do questions from the chat. So put questions in the chat if you got them or comments. I see a couple of them in there. I'm going to get to them in a sec. Number 13. Farah scratched. I think he's one person who can really take advantage of having a London Marathon in quick succession. Like, is that going to be his final race? You could see a scenario where now he tries to get healthy over the next couple months, has enough time to have a proper build-up, and he actually announces this is going to be my last race and then goes for it. Gordon and I have talked about this over and over again. Retirement within track and field and road running is sometimes a strange thing because sometimes people don't announce they're retired because they're just trying to keep it going, and then before you know it, it's like, wait a minute, they're coaching now, or they've moved up to they're mountain running. Like, it's just, sometimes people have the very formal, traditional team sports or big time individual sports goodbye, where they say, this is going to be my last tournament and I'm going to play it and that'll be it. Or this is my last season. But sometimes, a lot of times in track, they don't announce it. And it's just because they want to see if they can make a team, and then, okay, and then that rolls over to the next year. And then before they know it, I think they probably get a bit self-conscious of like, man, if I announce my retirement now, is that going to seem kind of odd because it's been a couple of years since I've made a team. But for Mo Farah, he's an athlete who obviously everybody deserves a proper goodbye, but he's one who is going to receive a big-time goodbye. So having his last race in London makes sense. Having it on a stage as big as the London Marathon makes sense. He talked about going back to the track before and trying to make one more team, be it Europeans or Commonwealth. That just doesn't look like it's happening. So if you don't run the times in track, you can't really get to that big stage. I guess they could invite you to a Diamond League, and that's fine, but you're not going to get on a World Championships or Olympics type stage unless you've run a legitimate time to qualify in. Whereas a marathon, they can choose their field. And I feel like London Marathon is a World Marathon Major is a big stage. That's bigger than a Diamond League race, right? Not up there with the Olympics, right? But it is up there in terms of big stages. And he can get into the London Marathon. He can have that proper goodbye, something that befits a guy who's won 10 global gold medals, someone who's run really good marathons in the past. What does he do in the London Marathon? Who knows? But I think that's sort of irrelevant. It'd be a great story if he somehow manages to pull a rabbit out of the hat and gets a win. But just having him go out like that, I think, is much more appropriate than having him go out in some sort of obscure meet where he's, trying to get one last qualifying time. Like, this is a grand stage for Farah, going out with in a race with other top flight athletes, right? In a serious race. So keep an eye on that. And I think the fact that it's in the spring kind of makes more sense. I think that would work more with his schedule, because if he had to wait another year, maybe he just says goodbye in a spring marathon and that's it. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe he wants to run for 5 more years. No clue. Probably getting ahead of myself here. Number 14, 2 to go. I just wanted to comment on something. You don't hear much about shoes anymore. And I think there was a couple-year stretch when you could not have a conversation about marathoning or distance running in general without talking about the shoes. And not to say the shoes don't matter anymore. Of course they do. But we've gotten to a point where people accept it. They've created limits around it. Some people don't like it. Some people do like it. It feels like there's parity within the brands now. An Adidas athlete won on the men's side. A Nike athlete won on the women's side. There's not a million photos of everybody's shoes every single race. For someone who didn't necessarily enjoy having to talk about the shoes every single time we talked about a road race or a time, I think this is a good development. I also think the times have settled in, basically, more or less, right? Like they're definitely fast. And when you talk about the last 5-10 years in marathon running and look at how many of those top performances are all-time performances, it's like you can draw a straight line to them. But even before the shoe technology really took off, we were seeing fast times being run in the marathon. Is it greater now? Yeah, like the numbers don't lie when you look at that. But I think there was a lot of people who were envisioning like, oh, everybody's going to run like what Kipchoge is running or even faster, or everybody's going to run like Bridget Kosgei's 2:14. Well, Bridget Kosgei can't even run like Bridget Kosgei ran, right? Like that was a special performance on that day. Did the shoe technology help? Absolutely. I don't think anybody's discounting that they're faster than the old models of shoes, but we never reached a point, at least with this current shoes, where the women are running 2:12 and the men are all running 1:58, which is what I think a lot of people assumed when this whole debate happened. Last one. Colts weather report. Shout out to Colt, podcast producer, chief marathon meteorological correspondent. I was watching this race back, and at one point the commentator said, not very much wind out there today either. And I thought, Colt nailed it. Because he said, what did you say, Colt? 4 miles an hour from the northeast?
Exactly that. That's exactly what I said.
Take a bow, Colt.
Thank you. Sometimes you're just born with a gift, and this is mine. So,
yeah, the weather was good. I don't know if did it end up raining that morning? I didn't see any water on the ground, so it might have been. Let's see. Okay, Colt, we have the past weather in London here. Sunday, yeah, it doesn't look like it rained on Sunday.
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah,
there was a pretty good chance, but I don't think it came through.
Yeah,
better weather than we thought initially, I think.
Yeah, which is another reason why I thought it was going to be a tad faster than it ended up being. The weather obviously can completely prohibit you from running fast, but it's not going to guarantee that you're going to run fast, because if the pack doesn't go, then the pack doesn't go. So those are my 15 takeaways from the 2022 London Marathon. Let's go and look in the chat here. Brendan, Gaudet prediction in Valencia, 2:13. So you got two things going on there, right? You have Latensabet Gaudet, who is just an otherworldly talent, making her debut in the marathon. So she's super fast, and she's going to be on a course that's also ridiculously fast. That marathon and every road race in Valencia has been quick, right? So the course record, I'm looking up, Perez Jeptirchir, 2:17.16. Gaudet, when she ran the half there, ran 62.52, which I have to laugh when I say it's that fast. I don't think she's going to go. I don't think 2:13, but I do think 2:14 is possible for the first one, because there has to be a bit of a learning curve, right? There has to be. Like, she can't, on her first time in the marathon out, go and break the world record. That would be astounding. But I could see something between 2:14 and 2:15 mid on that course. But yeah, we've never had anybody run the half marathon that fast. So if you're trying to predict, it becomes very, very difficult. On the same topic, Brendan says, how fast would she have to run for you to want her to step away from the track and focus solely on the marathon? That's an interesting question. How fast would she have to run in that debut? I think, well, it depends how you look at it, right? Because if you're going on looking at the track side of things, right, and you're like, man, what are the matchups I really want to see on the track? you obviously love the Sifan Hassan matchups if you're a fan of distance running. Like, you like Sifan Hassan versus Faith Kipyegon, or Gudaf Sagai, and in the 1500, and then you move up in distance. And the women's 5 and the women's 10 has been great, but it was very Hassan dependent. You also have Nian Saba there now as well. So I guess there's more just like out and out star power in the 5 and the 10, but part of that's just because the event, there's a little more staying power. The women's side of things is just more of a rotating cast. I guess my question is there anybody on the women's side, and are we going to see someone on the women's side who can dominate the event like Kipchoge? I'm not even talking about the times. I'm just talking about, is there somebody on the women's side who can come along now and for 10 years be the best in the world in the marathon? And I think Gidey obviously has the potential to do that. But I look at someone like Yahuala, I think she has the potential to do that. So to answer Brendan's question, how fast would she need to run? I would say I would want her just to be like where the top women in the world are right now, because I want to see someone with potential to dominate. So, 2:16 or a win. Even if she wins and runs a little bit slower, I think that would be enough for me. Because on the track, she's got world records. I feel like there's enough depth though now on the track to where we're gonna get a good matchup regardless in the 5 and 10, whether or not Gidey is there. But I could be wrong. I know it's a tough bar. I'm basically saying, are you going to be one of the greatest marathoners in history? If so, I want to see you run. If not, then go back to the track. I guess I want to see another, this is the rare time when I'd rather see a record chase than just a championship race. I want to see another women's 10,000 record chase with Hassan and Gidey in the same race. Because remember, a couple of years ago, Hassan got it, and then Gidey took it back from her in a matter of moments, right? Like a couple days, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. Yeah. In Hangolo, 2021, Hassan goes 29:06, and then Gidey goes 29:01. So I would want to see them head-to-head for the world record. Throw Nian Saba in there as well, too. I want to see him race for gold too, but I think that would be fun just to see them in the same pace type of race. Let's see what else. Tropical Runner says greetings. Greetings, Tropical Runner. Cliff. This is about Bekele. I'm assuming thought he's going to drop out, but at least he keeps it and beat Legesse and Lemma. Yeah, that's the crazy thing. Kipchoge stays in, and he ends up, and this is what happens sometimes in the marathon because big name people drop out or have bad days or just are a little bit off. He beats Lemma, who's the reigning champion, and he beats Legesse, who's run 2:02:48. So that's pretty good. Again, that was a good day for Kenenisa Bekele. Don't get trapped into this idea that he's going to win races forever. That was a good race for him. He beat really good people. Cliff also says, where's Titus Akiru? He's 5th all time. Yeah, he ran really fast in Milan. I remember I picked him for, I want to say, London one year when he was entered. Was that last year? Let me look up Akiru's profile here. Has he been running? No, hasn't run in 2021. Yeah, Milan, he was 2:02:57. Then he won in Abu Dhabi in 2:06:13. Haven't seen him this year. He's a potential number 2 guy. Again, a lot of number 2 guys. The number 2 guy list is crowded. More from Cliff. Chicago is good weather. Ruth Chepnegich, new world record. Yeah. I mean, she's going to go for it. Chepnegich takes big swings. You can always say that she's going to go for it, but I don't think we're going to see a 2:14:04 unless it's. I would be more inclined to say it's going to be a Gidey or it's going to be a Yahuala like sometime in 2023. That would be my prediction for world record, the next world record. Or Kosgei, if she gets it going again and gets healthy. But I think Chepnegich will go for it, maybe drop another 2:15. But that's just, it's so far away from everything else, right? Like that mark is a minute and a half ahead of Paula Radcliffe's time, which already was a pretty big outlier. Now it's not because Asefa's there, but yeah. I don't want to just get in the habit of saying everything's a 215 now. Other than Koskai and Yahuwah, Godem Gebre Selassie, Ruth Chekham Gegich, Perez Jeb Cheer all have chances. Yeah, there's a lot of depth on the women's side. And the difference in the women and the men in the marathon right now is all those women have won or have the capability to win big-time marathons. With the men's, it's just like, hey, when's the top dog going to show up? Like, we're all playing this sort of secondary game here, right? We're all in the JV race until Ilyud checks in. Beef Boy, what's up with the later start times? That can be permanent. Yeah, we're doing 12:30 Central, 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Eastern. That's so we can use the studio, which Bob O'Baby likes. So we're going to keep doing it because Bob likes it. Gordon will be back. It'll be a normal show again when Gordon's here. It's just sort of strange now because it's just me talking to a camera in an empty studio with Colt in my ear and an AC running. Can you still hear the AC, Colt?
It's not that bad.
Okay,
I don't think the audience can hear it as much as I can.
Okay, featuring the AC. Yeah, we'll be in here. It'll always be archived, though, so you can check it then later on at your convenience. But I think more people theoretically will get around to listening to it this way because, I don't know, those West Coast folks, you had to be really into track. When were we, 9? We were 9 Central, right? 7 a.m.'s, that's early.
Yeah.
We were abandoning our Hawaiian listeners, too. Folks out in Hawaii, that's like 4 a.m., I think. That's tough. All right. Any other questions in the chat? Any other topics that you want? So Wednesday, like we're an open book. Gordon's coming back, so I can put anything on the rundown. Anything else you want us to talk about for Wednesday? Throw it in the chat, or you can send an email, FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. Another one from Cliff. Cliff crushed it in the chat today. Bridget Koskai debuted 2:47.59 before breaking world record. Her time was 2:18.20, very unusual. Yeah, and you could look at the same thing with Asefa, right? A 2:34 down to a 2:15. I think your first marathon, you just throw that one out. I don't think that one's a great indication of what you're capable of. I think your training for the first marathon is sometimes more indicative than your actual time, because a lot of times people are doing great until 35K and they just overdid it a bit, and then they completely fall apart and can't handle it, and then they make a little bit of a tweak here and there. They get used to just being on your feet and racing that long, and then you see a performance that's more in line with what they're capable of. But I'm excited for the rest of the fall marathon season, though. I'm gonna say fall plus Valencia. I think there's still three good races. Question in chat. What times will Fred Curley run next year? Ooh, some sprint talk at the end. What times will Fred Curley run next year? Early track predictions. Let's go. Let's pull up Fred Curley from last year if we can, Colt. Gold medalist in the 100. 200 was a bit shaky, but it's okay. Ran one early season 400. I think we're gonna get a really good 200 from Curley next year. So I'm gonna predict that Fred Curley gets a PB in the 2 next year. His 100. Let's see. Let's pull up those. Let's go to personal bests up at the top there. There we go. 976, 1976. And then 400, he's got a PB of 43.64. 400, I don't think anything should. 200, I think he's going 19.67 in the 200 next year. And I think his 100 is going to stay right about the same. I'll get him at a 9.78. I think next year could be an interesting logjam with him and Bromell and Bracey and Coleman, if Coleman's able to get back to where he was, pre-suspension, because all those guys have run high 9.76. But I'm buying Curley getting a big PB in the 200. I think it's time. I think he'll get at least one really good one, and then that men's 200 is going to be just ridiculous next year with Lyles and Knighton at the front of it. Wednesday topic from Cliff. What is the fastest last 100 or 200 split among any race more than 800 up to marathon? All right. 800 up to the marathon. Fast last. Oh, man. Off the top of my head, I remember there's that New York City race where Wilson Kipsang, before he was suspended, it was like a tactical New York City marathon, and he was like talking trash to Lisa DeCisa. That looked pretty quick. Steeple, probably a lot of Ezekiel Kemboys. That was more last like 300. He would just take off with 300 to go. But I could put some more thought into that. That's a good one. Cole, how's this going for you? All right? We're all good?
Going great. Good show.
Good. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Beef Boy says, agreed. Look at Jackson. Curly will figure out the 200 eventually. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a smart point. I guess I should have used that as a reference point because it took Jackson a bit, and then because she went 4 down to 1, and then the 200 finally came around. We all just take for granted that the 200 is just something you can punch numbers in, and then they're good in the 1, they're good in the 4, it's going to work out. But there's more to it than that, and figuring out the curve. I just think he's going to have more opportunities next year to run a good one because, well, Curly's last race was Worlds, so he missed a good chunk of the season just because he got banged up after Worlds and wanted to rest. Remember, he wasn't even on the 4x1. So it's kind of interesting. Like Lyles did so much work post World Championships. Right? We talk about putting together a resume for Athlete of the Year when we talked about Athlete of the Year on the pod. So much of Lyles's best races came post World Championships, and then other people World Championships, and that was it. Just, I think Curly will have a longer season next year, a more complete season. He'll have an opportunity to run fast in the 2. But all right, one more here. Bobo Baby, sorry if I missed this. What is the prediction for Mance's debut time in Chicago? Does he break the American debut record of 2:07:56? I love it when we slice it up that thin. It's like American debut. I'm big on Mance. I've been big on Mance ever since college. I remember I went out to watch him do a workout. You can see it on the site from, I think, 2019. Did like 10 by 1K. He was just an absolute monster out there. It was ridiculous because he's running against good guys, and he was just running with good guys on his team, and he was just clearly a level above everybody else. So I think he's going to do it. I think Mance is going to be the marathoner that on the men's side that the Americans have been waiting for. I know that sounds dramatic, but I think he's the guy who goes straight-ish from college to the marathon when he still has his whole career in front of him. He's still got that leg speed, but at the same time, his whole collegiate career, he was thinking about the marathon. He signed up to do the trials marathon back in 2020 because I remember his coach said at ISO, was like, you just don't get that many opportunities to qualify for an Olympic team. So he was going to run, and he got hurt right before it, and he had to withdraw. But he's been thinking about the marathon for a while. So he's got that on his mind. It's not as if he's just jumping into this. It's not as if he's doing it late in his career when he can't get around the track fast enough anymore. So I think he's going to go 2:07s in this first one, maybe even quicker. And I think he has to, right? To be relevant, that's what you're going to have to run. I mean, look how many guys in London just ran 2:06 or faster. Guys that don't even get mentioned. Like, that's the prerequisite at this point. But yeah, Chicago's coming up on Sunday, so we'll definitely preview that. We'll probably preview that one Friday. We'll probably wait till Friday to preview that one, unless Gordon really is chomping at the bit to get after it on the Wednesday show. But thanks everybody for tuning in. This was a ton of fun. I hope you'll join again on Wednesday. Again, live 12:30 Central on YouTube, or you can catch it archive on the site or audio only, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. But I love it when people comment on the chat. It's a ton of fun for me to do the show. So that's it. Thanks to producer Colt for helping this go. He's the engine that makes the show go. So if you like the show, we got to leave Colt's Venmo up at some point. By the way, Gordon still hasn't paid me the $37 from that women's high hurdle bet. I just want everybody to know that. He says I haven't given him his info, but I was like literally sitting in this chair and he was sitting right over there. And I was like, I'll give you the info. Take out your phone. And he didn't want to do it. So
I think I should charge interest at this point. It's been like 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah. My strategy is, I don't know if I said this on the air, like every 2 weeks, just do a bet with Gordon that totally takes advantage of his like desire to be right. That's just going to override. Basically, only bet with him when I know I have a really good shot of winning. But now that he's not paying, I don't know if I'm going to do that. Because the Eagles are 4-0, right? So Gordon's he's a Philly sports fan. He's probably just through the moon. So I'm sure I could bet him right now, like, will the Eagles, he's like, the Eagles are going to go undefeated. And then I could probably put like my $100 up against his like 20 and just get an easy $20. So. Yeah,
it's a parlay for every game the Eagles have for the rest of the season.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's probably through the moon. That's all we'd hear about if he was on the show. All right. Anyway, I want my $37, Gordon, if you're watching. We'll talk to you guys on Wednesday. Thanks again. Make sure to subscribe and join. Talk to you guys next time.